Good evening, Gary.
Hello.
How are you?
Very, very good.
Can you guys hear me?
And
Yes.
now,
Okay, I'm having the hardest time. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Oh, I can get that out of the way. Got these lights because I'm in a basement and they're just like right on my face. Is that better? Can you guys see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay,
I wouldn't
perfect.
say the lights make it better, though.
Yeah, well, that's about as good as it gets.
That was
That's
a
it.
joke. That was a joke.
It was a good one. I'm deeply offended. No. I just want to say that at 6 o'clock, if we're still going, I have to stop, run upstairs, and extend the timer on the corned beef. So I just got an Irish dinner on its way here.
I think we should set a goal that the corned beef does not become a problem tonight. I think we should set a goal that you have plenty of time to get to the corned beef.
You know, it's so funny. So I ran home from work and made a soda bread, and I have that done. But I've got my daughter and my husband coming for dinner, and I'm excited. It's a fun holiday for us, St. Patty's Day. Do we have all of us here? Are we ready to go, Joanna?
Let's see.
I think we do.
3 board. Gary's here.
It's on the show a second ago.
Oh, there you are. Okay. Yeah, I think we're ready to roll.
Okay, so my sheets are out of order, so let me just get the agenda up. So I got that first. And Scott, do we know if the live stream is working?
should be.
Okay. All right, what policy do we have first, Joanna?
Scott, can you share the screen? And the first policy is 4206 tax exempt bonds. Some of it was missed. And so we are just presenting it to you again. You've already looked at it, but I just kind of wanted to bring it back just to take a final view before we went to the board.
All right. So the very exciting policy of tax exempt bonds, post issuance compliance makes my heart go pitter pat. I had no questions on this particular policy.
Are you seeing it on the screen?
I am. I'm looking right at it.
Wanted to make sure.
Anyone?
My only comment on it is it's way over my head. And that this is mostly relating to Scott, this has all got to be very new to him too. And it does say in here that the compliance monitor, which I assume is you, Scott, should receive training.
I completely agree.
So training you shall have. Were there any other thoughts about the training requirement or other questions within this policy?
I'm all good.
No, I don't know enough to ask questions.
Okay.
So the next one is 5005, the inspection one. We went over the next 2 policies before they've been revised and are ready for your.
I did have a question on 5005 on the new language coming in from policy 5007. Roman numeral number 2, rehabilitation and remodeling requests, refers to building principals. But we're in an organization where we have supervisors of other departments that may not typically be a building principal. So I just didn't know if that was somehow aligned to law or if that's just an organizational thing and we could reconsider just the principals to maybe department supervisors or some other terminology.
I think I'd have to look again at 155.1 or 4 to check that out, Dr. Kilburn.
Okay,
I mean, we should do what makes sense, first of all, is my first reaction.
yeah,
If there are other administrative positions or support positions that make more sense, then we should be looking at that.
so,
I may be able to check this out while we talk about other matters also.
well, I do think this, like barring any objection to that, I think maybe we should consider revising the wording to building principals and or department supervisors as appropriate, right? And then should you discover the law prohibits that and it really is just for building principals, we agree to defer to the building principals solely. Are there any objections to that idea, Chris or Gary or Michelle or Scott?
Nope.
Dave, would that work for you?
Yes, what were you thinking again? And or,
And or department supervisors as appropriate?
So, and
Okay.
this just applies to our OHM BOCES Middle Settlement Academy area, right? Like,
Our campus, yeah. So for example, we have a department, like we have a safety department, a facilities department, a PPD department. Those are overseen by people who are not principals and they do have staff. So they might want some input on this, but the policy doesn't really acknowledge them. Which is different than a school building, right? Where you'd have a principal who would oversee all of the staff within that building. This is a little bit different. Were there any other comments or feedback from the supervisors on policy 5005?
I didn't see any.
Chris, did you have any? No. So for me, with that language change, I think we're good to go forward, but I don't know if Michelle or Gary, if you guys are good.
yeah, I'm all set.
Awesome.
I'm good.
Good to go. Yay. Okay, so then we're on 5002, correct, Joanna?
Yes, we are.
Okay, and this we had seen last time and we had gotten rid of the laser pointer, laser beam. And we stuck with just the eye safety, correct? So I'm loving it.
that was what my notes reflected. So
Yeah.
this is really just our markup to reflect our discussion at the last meeting.
I'm A-okay with this. Gary, Michelle?
Yep.
Fine.
Good. Scott, Chris, anything?
Good.
I like it the way it is.
Check it out. We're good to go. So safety, good to go. Which brings us to wellness. Dun, da, 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 da. I did have a question. This actually came through labor, and the question really had to do with page 2. At the top of the page, item number 3, which was about participation in recess. So some of the concern had to do with if we have students that we're supporting directly because of behavioral, students who need additional behavioral supports, and they are escalated, sometimes putting them in a physical environment like recess doesn't always work. So you have to keep them de-escalated and get them down and then maybe not bring them out for recess. That's not necessarily tied to discipline though. So I think that would be not inappropriate. I do see where self-contained teachers might have a challenge with juggling recess for all kids, but they also do try to find other times in the day to provide physical activity for kids. Because as a self-contained teacher, you never typically have all the kids in your class at one time ever. So Chris, I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on that. do you see any issues with the statement written as it is for certain teachers?
I mean, it may need some work, right? Because I think it needs to be a little more clearly defined. And I think what's tricky about this policy is, so some of the supervisors had some feedback too. But I really think that feedback needs to go to the wellness committee first before it comes to policy. So our wellness policy a few years ago, this committee gave that policy the charge of looking at the social emotional side of things and all that. So they did a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I really think that we should go to them as well before it comes here and have that committee take a look at this, update it. Because like one of the comments was that the Cassell standards are updated. Like, are there things? So I really think that committee needs to look at it, because if this group is to change the policy other than legality stuff, it really kind of defeats the purpose of that wellness committee feeding up to the policy committee, if that's agreeable to everyone.
Well, I think that makes sense, because Dave, what I'm not seeing are a lot of the additional language that would reflect a change in statute, right? Or law. So I think this really is just a review of the policy in general. There were some change to pronouns in here. So I think, to your point, Chris, if the board committee is amenable to it, you could send this over to the Safety and Wellness Committee, have them review, make recommendations of the policy, then bring it back to this committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as the board is okay with it, I think that committee knows the board, this committee and the board makes the final decision. But I think it's respectful to give them the option to update some things and look at some things first.
Gary and Michelle, would you be okay with that?
Yeah, and just on page 4, if we're going to send this back and have them kind of look at something, on page 4, B, what is this? Roman numeral 4, letter B. The OHM BOCES will develop standards and nutrition guidelines for each building for all foods and beverages. We're not developing standards. We are given standards and then we adhere to them, correct?
Well, I don't know if they're talking about standards of like a curricular standard, or if it's a standard in the more colloquial use of the word.
Yeah, and I think the answer is the latter. And given that that term standards can have a sort of technical meaning in our field, as Michelle points out, that we could look at, we could do a vocabulary consideration here on the word standards, but the laws, and you'll notice this has a very long legal reference, because both the feds and the states have been all over the, selling sugar in schools problem. And the notion that in some cases, those directives or standards aren't all that specific. And I think the word standard here was meant to be more, guidance for what we would be serving on campus. And also this covers, those rules that go home about bringing food into school too. So
I think Michelle brings up a great question to look at that section, because school, Kate Dorr is really the resource on that one. And I don't even know, it mentions smart snacks in there, and I don't even know if that's a rule anymore. So, but I think Michelle brings up a good point that we need to investigate that.
So I've marked off the word standards. It's in both A and B there, but we'll put this down as a hold for your wellness committee to look at.
Wonder if that's not meant for nutrition standards.
Right, but I think Michelle's point is that to the extent the state or feds give us nutrition standards, we're not really developing the standards. We're developing how to implement or how to comply with those standards. I think.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just saying, like, as OHM BOCES ourselves, like, if they give us the guidelines, then we should construct what's appropriate for our location to be what we would want to tell our staff to do, right?
Yeah.
I'm just worried it's so broad, which, as maybe an educator, you want that broad so you can
Sneak in between.
enjoy some of the normal things that you want to enjoy, but at the same time, it's so vague. Yeah, I don't know. I think we just need to look at that.
Like it's too broad, maybe we have to make sure it's aligned and appropriate.
Well, on one hand, we're saying we're going to develop standards and nutritional guidelines, but we don't really explain to them what our expectations as OHM BOCES standards and guidelines are, right? So if I'm a teacher looking at this, or even a parent looking at this, and I go, what are your recommendations? Or are there no recommendations? So why do we even have that? You know what I mean?
Right. So that would be probably a separate document, like something like, we ask that anything that comes in for snacks has to be store purchased with ingredients readily be seen, marked with known allergens or something like that, right? Is that what you're? So
Oh, right. Is that
something?
Is that our agency? Is that our agency standard, or is that our state standard? And I don't know the answer to that.
I think that's a great question, Michelle, though, because I'm asking the same thing. Like the word develop, I wonder about the word develop. Are we developing, or are we passing along the federal guidelines to our students? So I think that's a great question for that committee to look into, and we'll get Kate involved.
Okay. Gary, did you have any objections for this going over to the wellness the wellness committee, the school, and Kate Dorr?
No, but if we beat your corned beef deadline, I would like to have a little separate conversation about the wellness issue. Not
Okay.
necessarily the policy.
All right. Fair enough.
Okay.
So, any other questions about this in particular that you'd like to bring to the attention of the wellness committee? Okay. So seeing none, we're going to move this over. So we'll table it from this committee. And we're going to move this to the wellness committee. Chris, I'm going to put that with you to bring over to them. And if Scott, you could reach out to Kate Dorr. Is Kate Dorr on the wellness committee?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's perfect. She's already on it. Perfect. Perfect. So this brings us to internet safety. 5,300. And I did have a question on this. On page 2, section C, paragraph 1. I just was curious about the rationale for that last sentence in that first paragraph. So the paragraph begins in using the computer network and internet, blah, 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 right? But there's a last sentence. No minor may arrange a face-to-face meeting with someone they meet on the computer network or internet without their parents' permission. And I wonder, does this change now as a result of Zoom? Like we have kids now, even in classroom settings where we might have them meeting face-to-face and, their teacher saying, I want you to Zoom with so-and-so on whatever. Or we're going to do a school project and the kids are Zooming on their project. I'm just curious, do we need to rethink that a little bit? Or is this tied to maybe a law?
Well, the face-to-face is arranging an in-person meeting.
Oh, for crying out loud, you're right. And do you know what? I was so busy seeing face-to-face this way. God, that it used to mean.
You're good on Zoom.
Pick up on that. Gotcha.
So sorry. Question answered.
Yeah, I think the sentence could be questioned on practicality basis as to whether or not that's really something we're going to be able to control. But Gary's point is well taken, that the idea here is that we don't want somebody, we don't want a minor to have been, lured into something by somebody out in Buffalo and go to meet them at Destiny Mall in Syracuse. That's what it's supposed to be about. A child victim kind of thing. But in any event, it has been in there written up that way. It's in our template that way, and it certainly could be questioned, however, on practicality point of view, but I don't think it raises the issue that you raised, Dr. Kilburn.
Yeah, no, clearly not. Like, how on earth? I was reading this going, God, kids are going to see each other in Zoom all the time, face to face.
I think that I think the acronym is because of that has gone from FTF, face to face, to IRL, in real life.
In real life.
Yeah, kids are not supposed to meet
I
each
think
other
you're
in
right.
real life. Yeah.
Oh, that's too funny.
My question with this was just, does this align with our code of conduct? And I noticed that it's not referenced as a reference anywhere, is that we're aligning this to our code of conduct, right? Would we?
Yeah, that's a good point. We don't have a cross reference for that. The reason for the policy, when it says it's required, that's because of the discount offered by federal law. And now it's gone right out of my head, the acronym for this, but I know our BOCES arranges this. You guys may be doing it for your components in terms of filing things to get the discount on internet service. The law requires that there be an internet safety policy and it have certain components, blum, blum,
Yeah.
blum.
Dave,
So
that's E-rate for E-rate.
E-rate, thank you, Scott. Exactly. It's the E-rate discount. And so, so this is drawn for the most part pretty narrowly to just meet the requirements of the E-rate, and that's the SIPA, the Children's Internet Protection Act and Neighborhood Children's Internet Protection Act. Putting a cross-reference to the code of conduct, if the committee would like to do that, would also be a sound approach.
That makes sense. Were there any other recommendations or questions about this policy? Anything from the supervisors, Chris and Scott?
Yeah, there was one on page 2, the very first paragraph up top. You know, we do have multiple tools that we use for internet filtering. And a lot of those decisions are made daily, right, by, you know, instructional leaders. The wording says the Board of Cooperative Educational Services will from time to time determine what internet material is inappropriate for minors. I wonder if that Board of Cooperative Educational Services needs to be changed to instructional supervisors or instructional leaders, principals, to include them, because that's really done on a daily basis based on whatever material students and staff are hoping to view.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this is saying determining by resolution,
Yeah,
right?
I don't know if that fits.
I understand the reality, and the problem that we have is that the federal statute says that the term inappropriate for minors, instead of the federal government telling you what's inappropriate for minors, the statute actually says that the Board of Education or other governance body for the educational agency shall decide what's inappropriate for minors. I expect that was a legislative compromise, recognizing that New York City and rural Georgia might have different attitudes towards certain things. But in any event, the statute does say the board.
Can we designate, the Board of Cooperative Education Services will designate like our superintendent or something to determine? Can we go that way? I mean, obviously we're in the weeds if we go every time they want to use a firewall system or something, right?
Well, I don't think that it's a matter of the board deciding which sites will be blocked. I think the assumption is that the board of the Acme School District will say, in this community, no violence, no sexually explicit stuff, no shopping on eBay. I don't know, you know, it's general terms. And if you ask me how many boards in our region our policy region of 40-some districts, how many boards have adopted a definition? I would guess that number is very small, like approaching 0.
So if we look to Roman numeral number 2, it talks about what we would filter out, right? So obscene child pornography defined in Appendix A, internet sites, which in the board's determination contain material which is inappropriate for minors. So
Is that, I hate to go back to the code of conduct, but is that in our code of conduct? So maybe that's where it's from, like we would determine per our code of conduct, which we don't have to spell that out. I mean, I think it's in there that we say that what's inappropriate, right?
Not in the meaning of this statute, I'm afraid. I
Okay.
mean, in a broad sense, the code of conduct talks about a lot of inappropriate conducts, but it doesn't talk about what the term inappropriate for minors shall mean for purposes of internet access.
Mm-mm.
See, the terms obscene, child pornography, and harmful to minors, those terms are all given a definition in the law, and so that's in the appendix. And the term inappropriate for minors was not given a federal law definition. It was left to each locality.
So I think we need to make a distinction on inappropriate for minors and inappropriate for the middle of a math lesson, right? So our administrators make on-the-fly decisions about putting something on Go Guardian because they don't want kids watching YouTube videos about bike accidents during math, but that's not inappropriate for minors. So I do think there's a distinction here that the board is setting an inappropriate standard, you know, about pornography, about vulgarity and things like that. Whereas an administrator is not really setting a standard about inappropriate as much as they are about, you know, using Go Guardian to say, you can't be doing this during the middle of math. You know, Scott, am I on point on that?
Yeah, I think so, Chris.
yeah, so I think in terms of that resolution, we'll determine by resolution, might it mean that we would have to make sure that we pass a resolution that really defines Roman numeral number 2 and says that the Board of Cooperative Educational Services recognizes that websites containing the following are deemed inappropriate for minors and therefore prohibited for use in this educational setting or something along that line. Dave, do you think that might work?
Yes.
Okay. So
Okay.
go ahead, Gary.
No, I just want to be sure that we leave the decision and the responsibility in the hands of the board, not the administration. This is kind of politically charged. If they come after anybody, they should be coming after the board, not you, and you should be able to defer to the board, you know.
Yep.
So no, I don't care mechanically how it works, as long as the ultimate responsibility remains at the board level.
And it does, yeah, right. Because to your point, Gary, when we look at the appeals process, that appeals process is to the board. So I think in order to meet that need of the resolution, we would just make a resolution that kind of like fleshes out Roman numeral 2 for the board to pass. And then the administrators are just enacting the resolution, the standards set by the board.
Right.
Yep.
So do we bring that resolution forward at the same time that we are ready to bring this policy forward?
We certainly could, and we'll see what, if anything, related to this may have already been resolved upon, but it says from time to time. So I think we could, to Michelle, your recommendation is a good one, because when we review this every 3 years, that's when we'll re-up that resolution every 3 years.
Right.
Any other thoughts on policy 5300? Okay, so this I think can move forward without changes, and I'll make a note that as a matter of, I don't know if that would be procedure, it'd be procedure, right? We have to put together a resolution.
And Dave's going to cross-reference this one?
the code.
I will. I will. I'll add that cross-reference to the other policy. Also probably to the one you're about to read.
I just want to write that down in my notes. I'm trying to write neat so I can actually read this later on. I hate writing because it takes too long. Need an accompanying resolution. Look at Roman numeral 2. Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Yep.
All right, 5301, purpose and use and administration of district digital information systems. Any questions about this policy?
Do we have to make a motion on 5301.1 to delete it?
Yeah, like, I don't know that we make motions in this committee, but it would go before the board.
To delete,
Yeah, as a deletion.
okay.
I had one question, and Scott, you could probably answer this, I think. But right on page 1 in the scope of the policy, Roman numeral 1, letter C, it talks about the policy applies to the use of all OHM BOCES managed devices, including, and it lists all the different devices that this includes, whether it's used by staff, students, or members of the public. We have a lot of devices that we issue out and support to our component districts. Is it understood in this policy that we're not responsible for the students' usage, or are we somehow responsible for their usage?
I think we would be responsible for their usage, yeah.
Right, so I mean, that could be interesting.
So whether the device is at our location or in a component district, they're still governed by the same set of policies.
Yeah, I don't think there's a conflict here.
No,
Okay.
I think I might think differently in that this is designed to manage and guard traffic through your network. And, you know, for example, our RIC has a lot of devices on its inventory list that might be out in the Camden School District or the Madison School District. The use of those devices on the networks of those school districts is governed by those school districts' policies, I think has been our approach.
okay, I was thinking specifically in relation to Chromebooks and how we manage those devices, but you're right. I guess we do have other Windows-based devices that are out there that are not directly managed by software applications from our BOCES.
Well,
Think
because-
of all your itinerant teachers, Chris.
So I don't know, would there be language that would have to change to somehow indicate that difference or not in this policy, Dave? Or do you have any thoughts on that? Or is it just how the policy would be interpreted in itself?
Well, this is based on a template that has been adopted in a number of our component and non-component districts, I guess, for our
Yeah.
BOCES. But probably all of those, well, all but maybe one or two of those districts are in our RIC region.
Could I ask you guys could I ask that we pull this back, and if Dave, if you guys could look at it from that perspective of the BOCES or the RIC, where we have a lot of this stuff out and about? Because this really covers a wide gamut: video conferencing, hardware, and then, access to networks.
Right, and that is if you will, the foundation of the policy as we conceived it here, which is governing anything that connects to the network of the XYZ school district or the XYZ BOCES.
Right.
And, you know, your guest network, where districts have got a guest network set up, it would apply there, as well as the secured network in a district. So, yeah, I mean, I can get on the phone with Scott and make sure I know the use cases that he's trying to manage, and reread it with all of that in mind.
Well, I just wonder if, I guess I wouldn't want to see a situation where, or I would want to know how pertinent it would be that if we have equipment or access that's out in other places, and that person is an employee of a component district and tapping into the component district's network, but they're using our devices to do so, and there's something not so good happening there, does that create an issue for our organization, according to this policy?
I don't think that's the way we've been using it, but I can give that another think for you, Dr. Kilburn. But our approach has been with all the RIC devices, for example, they're on our inventory, they're on the school district's inventory, and the behavior that passes over the network in that school district is subject to that school district's enforcement, if you will, you know, its own policies on its own premises. And they may have gotten the device from you guys. If they paid you back, I mean, that's something I've struggled with here too, is, you know, the RIC may buy something, but it immediately gets, you know, paid for by the school district and it's still carried on to inventory. So we kind of create some ambiguity for ourselves. But
Right.
and that's why I say, you know, certainly it might make sense for me to chat with Scott rather than take up the time of the committee on the ins and outs, and then we can talk about it.
Scott, does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So that was the question I had. I'm sorry if I put a wrench in the works with the question. Were there any other questions about this policy? Were there anything from the supervisors?
So the one I have is, I don't think we have a director of technology anymore.
Oh, yeah, where's that?
So I saw that, it's on a couple pages.
Yep, so we'd have to change that to your title now.
H3, bottom C is 1, Director of Information and Technology. There's a bunch
Yep.
of,
I think it's on page 5, page 6, page 7.
So every time we see that, we have to change it with Assistant Superintendent for Support Services.
So Director of Information and Technology is the old term, and it is Assistant Superintendent for Support Services.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good catch. Anything else? Gary, any wise insights into policy 5301?
Nope.
Let me just footnote it by saying that you all have heard about having an acceptable use policy. This is the acceptable use policy. Part of this is the acceptable use policy. Other sections of this regarding the management of the network have been drawn from state comptroller audits of school districts, and what the state comptroller's office has said it expects school districts to do about protecting these assets. So I just want you to know, it's not all stuff we made up.
Fair enough. Okay, so we're going to table that for review between Dave and Scott to come back to the group. And then that brings us to policy 5302, which was the usage of surveillance cameras
But you've got an old 5301 that our recommendation is delete because we've kind of rolled that content into the new one.
Right.
The one we just reviewed.
Just while we all understand that,
Yep.
yeah.
Were there any questions about that? Do we need to talk about that deletion or no?
Nope.
Okay. Michelle, are you good with that?
I'm all set. Oh, yeah.
And then that brings us to 5302. Use of surveillance cameras in the schools. And Dave, I had emailed you a question about that.
You did. I tried to give you a call late this afternoon and we didn't connect. The question that Dr. Kilburn raised had to do with, is on page 2, Roman numeral 6, part B, the last sentence. Neither shall the policy preclude the use of covert surveillance methods when deemed appropriate by BOCES or the DS. So, and your question was quite appropriate, Dr. Kilburn, which basically was about what's the interplay between this and collective bargaining, because there are a number of decisions out of PERB about the employer's obligation to negotiate with the union about the use of camera evidence for purposes of employee discipline. And a board policy can't override that. So I think my answer, Dr. Kilburn, is that the language here simply says the policy isn't going to tie your hands. There may be other rules that do tie your hands, and you would talk to a labor relations specialist or you would talk to your school attorney and get advice on that. It just that this policy couldn't be interpreted by anybody to limit what you were doing. You'd have to decide if the Taylor law rules or some other rule does limit it, then of course you couldn't do it.
Okay.
By the way, we didn't make the change throughout here. I much prefer talking about security cameras rather than surveillance cameras. Because when you use the word surveillance, you start off, I think, on your back foot. You start off sounding scary. So just a thought for the future. But it is a safety-based, safety-directed policy.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it. Were there any questions about this policy from the supervisors, from our board members?
I'm good.
None from my supervisors.
No, I guess the only thing that's new to me, Dave, is that we need to keep copies of these videos for 3 years.
Well, that's language that's in our template, and that I think in Vero and working this up, carry it over. You should have some guidance on how long you're going to keep things, right? And I don't know what you're doing as far as archiving, if at all, these matters, but you do have some legal purposes that these would be needed for. I guess this was our guidance on reasonable time periods.
I know we've got a year's worth, but that's certainly not enough.
Well, and also I'm not sure how you're keeping it, Scott. This is not. Some people would say this isn't realistic, but the idea is you're not keeping every minute of the camera rolling. You're keeping incidents, right? So if you've had a superintendent's hearing and you've used a clip from the security camera in that hearing, then you're going to keep that, for a certain period of time in case there's some legal challenge to it, or slips and falls, that kind of thing, in the parking lot, which we actually had one of here. But that is a recommended addition, and it's not in itself required. And so if you'd like more time to think about how you want to handle it there, we can just not add that at this point. I'm not sure, what your practice has been.
Yeah, it's been what you just described, right? We'd capture the video duration of the incident. That would then be saved and backed up nightly. But, like I said, we've got nightly backups going back a year. So I think we can leave it. I just need to change what we're doing. That's all. It's easy to do.
I know that people are downloading incidents and saving them when there's issues surrounding those. I think what's the challenge for an administrator would be deciding which ones could potentially lead to this, could potentially lead to that. So if we had a more redundant system, that would be better.
So it sounds like in terms of policy, it's good to go through. It's just a case of on the back end being ready to archive it. Should we, Dave brought up a great point. Should we swap out the words surveillance for security while we have the policy in front of us? I'm all for the swap. How
I
do we
am,
feel about that? Yes, Gary?
definitely.
Michelle, how do you feel?
Sure.
Swapping for Michelle. We're all good. All right. So Dave, wave the magic wand and make it secure, shall you?
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll talk with Vera and see if we can get you a refreshed copy before the board meeting.
Perfect. So- Okay, and then that brings us to policy 5304, information security breach policy. I don't think I had any questions on this. Were there anything from the board members or the supervisors or the assistant superintendents?
Not for me.
Nope.
Remember, we got corned beef on the line here.
We're still good for the corned beef. Scott, did you or your supervisors have anything on this policy?
No, we kind of this is new, right? As of 2020, Dave, and we've kind of been working to revise a lot of our operations to meet this policy. So I'm good with it.
Yeah, the law's been amended to expand how much was covered here. Let me just, you'll see that the legal reference here is to the state technology law, and that's different than our student data security concerns
Right,
under
law 2D.
Education Law 2D.
Yep.
Slightly different definitions of the information protected by each and the procedures under each. So this is split out and is carved out very much to what that statute requires.
Okay. All right, so this sounds like it's good to go. So I'm going to mark it as good to go. And then I did just want to mention, I forgot to bring it up. We did have a grammar comment on policy 5300, part C, number 1. If you look at the last sentence, the one I was talking about where I had the question about where I thought face-to-face was zooming face-to-face.
Yes.
It says we cross out the he, she, replaced with they, but meet is still plural.
I worried about that when I first glanced at it. I'll confirm this, but I'm pretty sure there's a little strike through on the middle of the S.
Got it.
Yeah, there is.
Perfect.
But I'll make sure of that. I know exactly what you're saying, Dr. Gilbert.
So I'm thinking that we're getting close to corned beef time, which is great. Joanna, well, by the way, I'm just curious, is anybody else eating or have eaten corned beef and cabbage for dinner?
We did
Ever?
it last
You did,
week.
Joe?
We did it last week.
Did it last week? Nice, nicely
Fit with our
done.
schedule a little better.
Yeah.
If I have a question. I have a quick question and it won't be very long. If a cooperative board member, I've been scouring our handbook and our policies, but if a cooperative board member wanted to take a term sub position in one of the component districts, is there anything that prevents a board member from doing that?
I think there is. I'm trying to open up the memory banks here. There is something about the BOCES, I'm a board member and BOCES board member being, but I don't know if it's employed at the BOCES or employed in a component district, Michelle. So
I think it's employed in a component district because the Mark Kennedy, the business official at Westmoreland, right? Didn't he have to leave our board when he took that
Yeah.
job?
Yes. That's my spot. Yeah, he had to leave.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So I think the answer to that is that you cannot be employed in a component district if you're on a BOCES board.
Is that a policy or what is that?
I don't know.
That would be, well, I mean, I'll check. I'll let Dr. Kilburn know. I think though, we're going to find that in section 1950 of the ed law, which is the section that
BOCES, yeah.
contains almost everything you need to know about boards of cooperative educational services.
Okay.
Yeah, Dave, if you could follow up with that, that would be great.
Will do.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
So Joanna, you want to read us off and make sure we're good on each policy? We know what's going forward, what's being held.
Sure. Okay, so 4206, it's ready to go. The tax exempt bonds. The inspection 5005 is okay with the changes. To add that department supervisor. 5002 safety conditions is okay to go. 5200 school wellness program, that needs to be refined, so we're tabling that one. 5300 internet safety is okay to go. 5301, both of them, I think we will hold until even the delete one, we'll do them both at the same time. 5302, usage of security cameras, as soon as I receive that, that's ready to go to the board. And then the 5304 information security breach policy, ready to go.
Wonderful. So Dave, I want to make sure I'm asking for the right hat. So if this isn't a question for the policy service, I can redirect somewhere else with it. But does the policy service write sample resolutions or no?
No, but
Okay.
sometimes.
I'm looking for a sample resolution to go with that 5300 regarding Roman numeral number 2.
I think the list, I think the creative process should probably begin with some input from your end,
Yep.
you collectively, as to the categories you think the board would want to declare as inappropriate for minors, and then we can help you refine that, and then the resolution wrapping won't be too tough at all. Michelle, remind me, what was, because you had a very specific type of employment in mind, and I don't know that it'll make a difference, but I want to have that bit of information at hand.
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess twofold. One, a term subbing position, teaching position, and then even a substitute position.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so barring no desire to stay in Zoom, I think we're ready to go. Now, Gary, you wanted to stay on, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Not necessarily on Zoom. I mean, you can give me a call or.
Well, why don't we just, Joanna, why don't you make me a host? And then I'll stay on with Gary.
Yeah, that's Scott. Scott has to make you a host.
Scott, are you able to do that?
Is he there?
And then disconnect the live stream for the close of the meeting?